This is the Read to Lead podcast, episode 537. Hi there, and welcome to the Read to Lead podcast, where we explore the habits and insights that can propel your career and personal development. I'm Jeff. Today, we're diving into the fascinating topic of mastery. It's a solo episode today, and how you can get better at almost anything. This is a topic we touched on a few weeks ago when we had Scott H. Young here to talk about his book, Get Better at Anything, 12 Maxims for Mastery. He was also our guest inside the community last Thursday. We did a private session for Read to Lead Plus members with Scott. As our topic this month in the community is all about self-improvement, we're going to take this opportunity in this episode to dig into that a little more deeply. Whether it's a professional skill or a personal hobby, the journey to mastery is something we can all embark on. So let's explore what it takes to achieve it. To guide us on this journey, we're going to be drawing from the wisdom of some great minds, folks like the late physicist Richard Feynman, Scott H. Young, who I mentioned, and Carol Dweck, among others, who have devoted their lives to understanding, learning, and mastery. So this is a good time to grab a notebook if you're in a place where you can do that, or if you're listening to this, say, via the Snipped app, you can use that Create Snip button to bookmark your favorite sections. So let's get started. First things first, what exactly do we mean by mastery? We should define that. Mastery isn't just about being good at something, though that's a part of it. It's about continuously improving and pushing the boundaries of what you know and can do. It's the difference, say, between being a good pianist and a concert pianist, or between being a hobbyist photographer and a professional one. Richard Feynman, who I mentioned, the brilliant physicist, had a unique approach to learning that we can all benefit from. This is something, by the way, we talk about in my course, Note-Making Mastery. He believed in deep understanding rather than just rote memorization. And this is famously encapsulated in what's called the Feynman technique. Before I jump into the four-step process of the Feynman technique, a couple of Feynman quotes that I think are applicable here. He said once, "Nearly everything is really interesting if you go into it deeply enough." Nearly everything is really interesting if you go into it deeply enough. He also said, "Study hard what interests you the most in the most undisciplined, irreverent, and original manner possible." I love that. Study what interests you the most in the most undisciplined, irreverent, and original manner possible. So the Feynman technique is a four-step process. Step number one, pretty simple. You choose a concept. You pick the topic or skill that you want to learn. Step number two is teach it to a child. Now, do I literally mean teach it to a child? Not necessarily, but you want to be able to explain it in simple terms, as you would if you were indeed teaching it to a child. Why? Because this, Feynman says, forces you to understand the topic or skill deeply. Step number three in the four-step Feynman technique process is identify any gaps. When you struggle to explain something, you've found a gap in your knowledge. How many times have you read a book on a particular topic, say, and you're in conversation with a friend or a colleague about that topic, and then you go to explain something from the book and realize you're struggling. You can't quite get there. Well, that's because you don't understand it as deeply as you think you do. You have found a gap in your knowledge. So identify gaps is step three. And then the fourth step is to review and simplify. Go back to the source material and fill in those gaps, and then simplify your explanation further still. Simplify your explanation again. This technique is powerful because it pushes you to understand concepts at a fundamental level. Again, that's called the Feynman technique, popularized by physicist Richard Feynman. Now that we've got a grasp on what mastery is and a technique, the Feynman technique, to deepen our understanding, let's talk about practical steps to get better at anything. And Scott H. Young, my guest on the podcast a few weeks ago, is not only known for writing the recent book, Get Better at Anything, 12 Maxims for Mastery, but he's also the author of the Wall Street Journal best-selling Ultra Learning. And in that book, he provides us a roadmap that we can follow. Here are some of the key strategies from his work. I want to cover 7 specifically. The first one is meta-learning. Before you dive into a topic or a skill, spend some time understanding how learning works. Figure out the best methods, resources, and tools for the specific skill you're trying to learn. Number 2 is focus. Create a distraction-free environment as best you can and dedicate specific times for deep work. I talk about this in my book, Read to Lead, with regard to reading and making an effort to read in a distraction-free environment and actually schedule your reading time and read in the same place or chair as often as you can. Start a timer and communicate to your brain, I'm going to read and concentrate and think deeply for the next, 25 minutes or whatever it is. All those things go hand in hand for helping create a distraction-free environment. And it probably goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. The phone is either on mute or, better yet, it's not even in the room. The third strategy is directness. Practice the skill directly rather than just learning about it. For instance, if you want to get better at speaking a language, spend more time speaking it, not just learning about how to speak it. The fourth strategy from Scott is drill. Break down the skill into smaller parts and practice those parts intensively. Now, this could mean, say, practicing scales for a musician or focusing on specific types of math problems, for example. Number 5 is feedback. Seek out feedback and use it constructively to improve. This is one of the reasons why I'm a big proponent of mastermind groups, because every time it's my turn in the hot seat, what am I getting? I'm getting feedback from other people whose opinions and knowledge and experiences I trust. Feedback can come from peers, but also mentors or even self-assessment. So seek out feedback and use it constructively to improve. Strategy number 6, according to Scott, is retention. Use techniques like spaced repetition, for example, to ensure that what you learn sticks. It's great to have a notes app, too. Something I talk about in the Note-Making Mastery course I developed a couple of years ago. A place where the things you're learning are kept and stored so that new ideas can connect to existing ideas. And the 7th strategy, the last one we'll talk about from Scott's book, Ultra Learning, is experimentation. Don't be afraid to try new methods and approaches. Learning is a dynamic process, and sometimes unconventional methods can yield great results. It reminds me of that Richard Feynman quote I mentioned earlier. Study hard what interests you the most in the most undisciplined, irreverent, and original manner possible. Now, Scott's approach emphasizes the importance of being deliberate and structured in your learning process. It's about more than just putting in the hours. It's about how you use those hours effectively. Finally, let's talk about the mindset required for mastery. This is where the work of Carol Dweck comes in. Her research on the growth mindset is essential here. A growth mindset is basically the belief that abilities and intelligence can be developed through hard work and dedication. Through dedication and hard work, abilities and intelligence can be developed. Here are some ways to cultivate a growth mindset. Number 1, embrace challenges. See them as opportunities to learn and to grow. Number 2 is learn from criticism. We talked about feedback earlier. View constructive criticism as valuable feedback rather than a personal attack. Of course, it helps if the person delivering it is delivering it with love, right? So they play a role here as well. Number 3, celebrate effort. Focus on the process and effort rather than just the outcome. In his book, Atomic Habits, James Clear says, we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems. Systems and processes are key to this whole thing. Focus on the process and effort rather than just the outcome. It's the journey as much as it is the destination, in other words. And number 4, persist in the face of setbacks. Understand that setbacks are a natural part of the learning process. And by adopting a growth mindset, you'll be more resilient and motivated to pursue mastery even when the going gets tough. Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, is, of course, a work that virtually everyone is familiar with, but another book on mindset that I think is just as good, but lesser known, is a book by Dr. Nate Zinsser. He's been teaching at West Point for decades now. His book, and we interviewed him on the podcast about this book, is called The Confident Mind. That's The Confident Mind by Dr. Nate Zinsser, Zinsser. I'll put a link to that interview in the show notes of this episode in case you want to check that one out. Mindset by Carol, great book too, but I think The Confident Mind by Dr. Zinsser is just as good, but a lesser known work. Mastering a skill involves a combination of deep understanding, practical strategies, and the right mindset. By applying the Feynman technique, following Scott's ultra-learning principles, and fostering a growth mindset, you can accelerate your journey to mastery. Remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about continuous improvement and enjoying the process of learning. Let's not forget that part, right? It should be an enjoyable process. To summarize, we talked about understanding mastery, first and foremost, practical steps to mastery, and the mindset for mastery. If you want to dig into the episode more deeply, I encourage you to check out the show notes where I have the complete script I used for this episode. And again, links to the resources that I talked about. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. If you found it helpful, please share it with someone who's on their own path to mastery. I hope you'll do that. And one final note with regard to the work of Scott Young, which we talked about today. Scott was again our guest expert inside the Read to Lead community last Thursday. We did a private chat with him for Read to Lead Plus members. You can watch the replay for free when you sign up for a free 2-week trial of Read to Lead Plus. You can also see all the guest expert sessions we've done over the last year plus, each of my monthly AMAs, book summaries, and much, much more. Browse our entire library for free for 2 weeks when you go to jeffbrown.me. No obligation. If you decide to stay, it's just $9 a month. After that, the website, one more time, is jeffbrown.me. And by the way, the show notes page for this episode is readtoleadpodcast.com/537 for episode 537. Thanks again for being here. Hope to see you next time. Until then, as always, remember, leaders read and readers lead.